Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for the Northwest Consumer Law Center webinar series. Tonight's webinar is Taking the Risk Out of RISC, Retail Installment Sales Contract. My name is Amanda, and I'm the Executive Director of the Northwest Consumer Law Center. Tonight, we have Northwest Consumer Law Center staff attorney, Alyssa, with us, who is going to talk all about buying a used car and how to protect your rights when doing so. If you have questions during the webinar, please enter those in the chat box on your right. We will be answering your questions at the end of tonight's presentation. The session is being recorded and will be available to view on our website. Attending this webinar does not create an attorney-client relationship. This presentation will provide legal information and it's not a substitute for individualized legal advice. If you're seeking legal advice, you're welcome to contact Northwest Consumer Law Center after this webinar. We'll be posting information on how to contact us at the end of Alyssa's presentation. And with that, I'll hand it over to Alyssa.
Thanks, Amanda. So welcome to our second auto fraud webinar. This one is about contracts, which I hope every single one of you expect to get when you purchase a car. Just to start out with basic contract law, what are contracts? They are agreements between two parties. And a breach happens when at least one party, could be two, sometimes both parties do it, but usually one party will not hold up their end of the bargain. And we call this bargain for exchange. That's what a contract is. So for example, if I went to a bakery and wanted to buy bread, my exchange for bread is my money. I give them my money, they give me bread. That's the exchange. The bargain is usually the sale price. So that's sort of like an informal contract because that's not really written down. But that's an example of what essentially a contract is. A contract has a 6-year statute of limitations in the state of Washington, and that's from the date of the breach, not the date that you signed the contract. So if you signed the contract in 2006, but the breach happened in 2014, then you could possibly still bring the suit in 2020. So 6 years is a long time. A lot of people are surprised it's that long, but it's 6 years for a written contract. For an oral contract, it's only 3 years, much shorter. And the reason for that is because of evidentiary issues. It's a lot harder to track people down and to prove up a case if it's just an oral contract, if there's nothing written down. So, some of our clients have mentioned, oh, well, what if I record the conversation? Turns out in Washington State, we are a two-party consent state for recording. So unless you let the other person know, hey, I'm recording this conversation, and they agree to it, it won't work if you don't get their consent. So usually when we have clients that mention that, we can't really use that. It's my general advice as an auto fraud attorney to get a written contract if you can. If you're buying a used car off of like Craigslist or from a parking lot somewhere, you're probably not going to get a written contract. So you have to understand you're going to be stuck with what you buy. If you buy a car at a dealership, they will give you a written contract for sure. They should. Another thing about Washington state law is that it assumes competency between the parties. This means that the courts will assume that you're an adult, they're an adult, you both can read the contract, you both can understand it. It goes into more details like if there was a language barrier, there's an exception if you're a minor, if you're a child, or if you have certain disabilities. But for the most part, the assumption is if you can read the contract, you should be able to understand the contract. So damages. A lot of people wonder, okay, so there's a breach of a contract. Well, what happens? What's the harm? What's the penalty? A big question is whether it was material or immaterial. Material meaning, does it actually matter? Or immaterial meaning, no harm, no foul. So if we use my bread example before, let's say I wanted my bread packed in a bag and instead they gave me the bread packed in a box. That's probably immaterial because I'm still going to get my bread. It's just packed differently. And ultimately, I don't lose anything. So that would be an immaterial harm. For auto fraud contracts, usually it's material because you're paying something. Maybe you overpay for a service contract. You pay $3,000, but they actually sell you the lower level warranty that is actually worth $1,000. And so you don't get what you paid for. So you would lose damages in that way. That'd be a material loss. There are also statutory damages, meaning if breaching the contract in some way violates a federal or state law, there could be an amount that the law just sets that says the penalty is this much. There's a federal law that we'll talk about later, the Truth in Lending Act, that has a $2,000 penalty. So that's just a straight penalty that if you prove the case, you get $2,000. Doesn't matter how much you personally lost. The dealership will just have to pay the $2,000. Okay, so that's your basics for contracts. Okay, so now getting into auto fraud. There are two types of vehicle sale contracts. The first type is called the buyer's or purchase order or the bill of sale. Lots of different names for the same thing. The buyer's order is typically for cash-only vehicle purchases. This is like the lower level contract. It's the most basic one. There's no financing details because there is no financing. It's usually just, I'm paying $5,000 for this car. Here's $5,000. Okay, very straightforward. It's usually 1 or 2 pages max. Like I said, basic contract, very simple. The second type of contract is the RISC, the Retail Installment Sales Contract. This is a financing contract. So it'll have information like the APR, it'll have how many payments you need to make. It should detail out all the specific details about this financing that you're agreeing to. These can be a lot longer. I put 2 to 3 pages, but honestly, it just depends on the dealership and how many things they want to tack on there. But 2 to 3 pages is normal. And it can be combined with a buyer's order. So sometimes dealerships will give you a buyer's order and a RISC together, or you'll have only a bill of sale, but you won't have a RISC by itself. A RISC will always come with a buyer's order, typically. All right, so those are the 2 types that we're going to be talking about today. Okay, so let's start with the buyer's order. So these are 3 different examples of buyer's orders, purchase order. And as you can see, they all look a little different. There's no standardized form amongst all the dealerships out there. The example 1 and example 2 are from kind of smaller dealerships, sort of the used car dealerships that you see on the highway, Bob's Used Cars or whatever it may be. Those two are more simplified. The example number 3, which you can hardly see because it's so detailed, is from a bigger dealership. It's from a dealership that has like a chain, so it has all kinds of different cars that they sell. There's like a Mercedes lot, there's a Toyota lot. So that's why it's more complicated, but these are all buyer's orders. And just eyeballing it, you can kind of see they sort of have similarities. There's a box here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there's a box on the right side of these pages that sort of has all these numbers, all the calculations, and a grid on the left side that will have more detailed information about the purchase. So let's take a look at the very first example number 1. Okay, so this is example number 1. All right, and let's just take a little tour of this, what they're calling a bill of sale. It's all the same thing. So here we are at the very top. You'll have the seller information. That's the name of the dealership. Okay, next to that is our vehicle information. And what I circled here is the condition of the vehicle. And there's a checkbox that says new, there's used, rebuilt. You'll want to make sure they check the right one because it's a problem if they don't. Under that, it says title brand. That, again, will tell you the condition of the title. You'll want to know if it's a salvage title, a junk title. This one doesn't have any check marks, so assuming this is a car with good title. Another thing to notice, if you just look a little bit on the right here, under mileage, it says exempt. That sounds kind of fishy. Turns out it's not that fishy. For cars, there are exemptions for mileage for certain vehicles. So an example is if a motor vehicle. If a motor vehicle is not self-propelled, they don't have to list a mileage. So that would be like a fifth wheel trailer or most trailers. If they have mileage, then they don't have to be disclosed. Also, if a vehicle is more than 10 years old, 10 or more years old. So if you look at this bill of sale, you see the year here says 2006. So this car is over 10 years old. They don't have to disclose the mileage. Okay. All right. If we keep going down here, the next box on the left side is trade-in information. So it will list whatever you're trading in. You'll want to, of course, make sure this information is correct. Below that says insurance information, which is blank, lien holder information, also blank, and the next box below that is blank. Sometimes people don't fill out these things completely, and a lot of the times these are just forms, so they'll fill them out differently for each purchase. With this one, they don't have insurance information or lien information that's relevant. Okay, so let's go to the right side. It says settlement, which is actually just a breakdown of the charges and the costs of this vehicle purchase. So something to take a look at is what I call the documentary service fee. This is something that is often abused by dealerships, as you will see. By law, they can only charge $150 for the documentary service fee. What is a documentary service fee? Well, it includes administrative costs for motor vehicle taxes, licensing, titling, pretty much anything that you can think of that kind of goes into the realm of like registration and licensing. They can only charge you $150. All right, so that's rule one. Rule two, it has to be conspicuous. So here you can see they made a good attempt of that. It's bold, which is good. And it says that it is a negotiable fee, which is required by law to disclose as well. So they can only charge up to $150. It's negotiable. It has to be conspicuous. Well, if you look here, they charge the $100 for the documentary service fee at the top. If you look a little lower, they charge $12.75 for a filing fee and then $183 for a license. So that's over $150. And then if you look a little lower, documentation fee, $150. So you can assume if you're being overcharged for something like the documentary service fee, the dealership is probably just pocketing that extra money because by law, they're not allowed to charge over $150. So if you see this happening to you when you go into a dealership, you should definitely tell them, hey, by law, you can only charge $150 for these things, so you need to take them off. And if they push you back, then you're welcome to walk away. Honestly, you probably don't want to buy a car from someone that's trying to take money just right out of your wallet. So that's something that you should definitely tell them, hey, you need to take that off of my total. Another thing I circled on there is a Carfax at the very bottom. They charged this person $26.50 for a Carfax. Usually Carfaxes are free, so I'm surprised that's on there. You could always ask a dealer, may I have a Carfax for free? If you find a car online, usually they will have a Carfax for free on the website. So there's no reason to pay for the Carfax in that case. But other resources that you should check out, one is the NICB. That's the National Insurance Crime Bureau. It's totally free. You can go on that website right there and check the VIN. This will show you if the car had ever been stolen or if there's any sort of criminal record associated with the VIN of that car. Usually if the car is totaled or had been involved in any awful, horrible collision. It's a good place to check. Carfax won't necessarily have that information. So the NICB is a good place to go. Another place to go is NMVTIS, or vehiclehistory.gov, essentially. That stands for the National Motor Vehicle Title Insurance Service, I believe. I could be wrong, but that's pretty much what it is. It's a title search. So if you go there, you could also search the VIN and see if it's a clean title. That'll also tell you if there's a salvage or any other things that might be hidden from the Carfax will be there. You should not, I would not recommend, do not rely entirely on the Carfax. The Carfax gets its information from other dealerships, from insurance information sometimes, but it's not the full picture. I mean, if a car was involved in, let's say, a fender bender and the owner never told their insurance company, well, then Carfax isn't going to know about it. So don't rely on the Carfax as your only information about the car. Try to look at other places too. Okay, so here is example number 2. So this is a completely different dealership. Same thing. It's a buyer's order. They call it a purchase order here. And for the most part, it looks pretty good. There's the vehicle information. Here it does list a mileage for a car from 2007, so not required, but they decided to list it. So cool. That's nice. Thank you. If you look on the right side here, I circled a few things because it's the documentary service fee again. So the top one says EMS fee. I don't know what that is. I don't think they're allowed to charge for it. The documentary service fee is $149.95. So that 5-cent discount, nice. And then there's a license fee right below that. So again, the total of all those things, over $150. So I would have advised this person to negotiate those things down. Like, they're not allowed to charge those extra things. So always keep your eye out for the documentary service fee. It's a very easy way for dealerships to just get more money from you. Okay, our last buyer's order example. So I listed this as example 3A on the bottom right corner here because this one is so big. I had to break it up into 2 parts. So this one is from the big dealership, like the dealership that has a whole chain of dealers. So their buyer's order looks a lot more complicated and there's a lot more information on it. Same thing as the other one, basic car information on the very top. On the left side, it says used car trade-in, just like the other one. So this one had no trade-in, so that's all empty. If we look on the right side, the very top thing I circled is what it says is portfolio theft, the thing in blue. And then if you look below, I also circled service contract. So those are both dealer added options, okay? Anytime a dealer tells you, hey, we have all these cool things you could add on, that's what they are. Add-ons are never required. You can honestly just buy a car, no add-ons, and just walk right out of there with your vehicle. These are completely optional. And don't believe a dealer that tells you that they're required. They're not. They're never required. The portfolio theft is an anti-theft like subscription. It depends on what options they give to you. Could be subscription, could be something that has like a vehicle tracker. It could be like an alarm system. It could be all kinds of things. Honestly, you can save a lot of money by just going to Car Toys and getting exactly what you want, or Amazon or whatever. But if you want to get it there at the dealer, then that's what you're getting. The service contract, again, your choice, completely your choice. A lot of places will have levels, different levels, like low level 1,000, high level 5,000 or something. You should ask the dealer to explain to you the different levels. A lot of dealerships will just say, oh, like this is how much it costs. It's 5,000, but they won't tell you what's in it. You should figure out what is covered and what isn't. Because sometimes things are not covered and then you're stuck. And that's always disappointing. Okay. The last thing I have there, again, the documentary service fee. See, nobody gets this right. It's really disappointing. So if you look on there, it says vehicle excise tax. Taxes are covered under the documentary service fee. Okay. If you look a little lower, again, documentary service fee, they charge $150. I actually can't see that part of the slide, but I'm assuming that they charge $150. So again, over $150. Okay, so this is like the bottom portion of that same contract because it was so big. I broke it in half. So the top part there that I put in blue, it says financing condition. So what is a financing condition? It means when this buyer's order is combined with a RISC contract, it means that the financing has to be approved or all the contracts are void. So that's all that it means. If the financing doesn't get approved, then you need to get a new contract. That's actually required by law. So I'll talk about that a little bit about that later, but it's required by law that they get the financing to be approved within 4 business days. So it's nice that they put that there. The second big chunk, all in caps for that top part, it says arbitration provision. So what is arbitration? Pretty much it means you can't take the dealer to court if you want to. It lists sort of the types of claims. Usually if you have a contract dispute, that'll go to arbitration. Usually actions that occur after the contract will go to arbitration. We at NWCLC, we don't love arbitration provisions. And remember, the other 2 contracts, the more basic ones, didn't have this. So this is kind of like fancy contract, fancy big dealership. They're trying to be smarter. They have this arbitration provision in here. Again, not required. You honestly can just try to negotiate it from them and say, hey, I don't really like this here. I don't really want it here. And you can walk away. If they say, hey, this is non-negotiable, everything goes to arbitration, then that's your call. We will consider cases that have an arbitration provision, but again, it's not really our preference. It makes things a little tougher for you. And the last part on the very bottom here that you should read, all of this is stuff you should read, by the way. It's all fine print, but you should read it when you're there. It says that it doesn't include oral agreements, right? So this is essentially what we call the 4 corners rule. What's within the 4 corners of the contract is all that the contract covers. So if they tell you orally, oh, this is included or that's included or whatever, doesn't matter. Everything that is written down is what is in the contract. Okay, and sort of my goal with this webinar is to just familiarize you with what these contracts look like so they're not as scary, which is what we're doing right now. You see they all look kind of sort of scary, but they're not that scary if you take the time to read them. Okay, so this is the same contract. This is still the buyer's order. This buyer's order had a second page that was like tacked onto the back of it. Okay. And this just looks like not fun at all to read. And it's not, but my tip for you is to read it carefully, because it turns out a ton of these things don't even apply to this order. Okay. This giant blue box on the top, right, and the other blue box on the bottom are about trade-in vehicles. Like if you trade in a vehicle, all of this contract applies to you. Well, there was no trade-in vehicle in this purchase. So that just, it should have a big X through it, honestly. And then the yellow box that I highlighted there, that's all for new cars. So again, this is someone who bought a used car, so that doesn't even apply. That should have a big X through it too. So be really careful when you read these contracts. A lot of them are just forms. They sort of apply to all cases generally, but do they apply to your particular case? Maybe not. So this red one here is an interesting thing. It says it's called a limitation on warranties, and it says that a waiver will be in a separate document. So waivers of warranties will be somewhere else. It won't be in this contract. It will be in some other document. And it includes the implied warranty of merchantability. Quick note about the IWM. It is your most basic protection from the state that says when you buy a car, it has to be safe and it has to be drivable. Your bare minimum. It does not guarantee, fun backup camera or like air conditioning or any other fancy doodad. The car has to be safe to drive and it has to actually drive. So if there's a warranty on here that is waiving it, that means you are agreeing not to go after this dealership if the car is unsafe or if the car can't actually drive. And we don't recommend waiving it if you can help it. And there are minimum requirements to waiving it. The dealership has to talk to you about it so you understand exactly what you're waiving. Otherwise, if, for example, if you buy a service contract, you don't waive it automatically. And again, if they don't discuss it with you, you don't waive it. Part of it has to do with what you understand. You go in thinking, yes, I want a car that is safe, that has a functional airbag, and also a car that can drive. So they need to explain to you why they're not guaranteeing that. Okay. Now we're going to take a look at a RISC, a Retail Installment Sales Contract. This is like buyer's order, but like the next level, because this is one contract here, and you can see I broke it up. There are 3 pages. There's a lot. There's a lot of little fine writing. And this RISC is from that same big dealership that had that buyer's order that was 2 pages. So this customer left the dealership presumably with at least 5 pages of contracts, if not more. So it's a lot of paper, but it's all important stuff. Okay, so let's just dive into this RISC and see what is going on here. Okay, so if you take a look at it here, you'll see that it already looks a little different right off the get-go. Looks different from the buyer's orders. At the very top, it says Retail Installment Sales Contract. That's how you know it's a RISC. All right, it'll have the name of the buyer up there. On the seller, again, the dealership name is right there, right below the details about the car. You'll want to make sure the buyer's order and the RISC matches, that all the information is the same, because again, the RISC should come with the buyer's order. So make sure all this odometer number is right and that your everything else about the car is right as well. Okay, so let's start with this blue box here. This is what we call a TILA box. TILA stands for Truth in Lending Act. This is a federal law that requires certain disclosures be made. And I put a list there on the right there of all the different things that they must disclose. The APR, that's the annual percentage rate of your financing that you got for the car. So here you can see it says 3.24%. So that is the annual rate for the car. They need to disclose the balance, the amount of the finance charge. So right there, the amount, that's all the APR essentially accrued until the end. So how much you actually pay in interest, $687. The amount financed, meaning how much she's borrowing, she or he, this person or they, how much this person is borrowing, the total of the payments, which would be the borrowed amount plus the interest, right? And then the total sale price. So also required is the total number of payments, and the due dates and the period of the payment. So you can see that right below. It says number of payments, and it has the amount of payments. So all that information is there in the TILA box. Not all RISCs will have boxes. The box is actually not required. So if they disclose all this information in a list with no boxes, it can still comply with this law. But they have to have all this information in there. Okay, right next to that in yellow is a warranty disclaimer. Weird, since that other contract said that it's supposed to be in a separate document. So I suppose this might be a separate document. But what this warranty disclaimer says is that it says that the dealership is waiving the IWM. I don't know if this person is okay with that. Again, they need to discuss it with you. So as long as you're okay with that, then that's fine if it's there. Otherwise, you need to discuss with them and make sure it's not on the contract. It also says too that if a service contract is bought, then the IWM can't be waived, which is true. That is consistent with the law. Okay, so this is the bottom part of the same contract, the bottom half. And I just wanted to highlight a couple things here. The blue box says optional gap contract. So this is something a lot of people don't understand. Dealerships make some money off of selling these things, but this is what a gap contract is. A gap stands for guaranteed asset protection. Not like a gap between two spaces, although you can kind of think of it that way. So what a gap insurance covers is the difference between what the car is valued at currently, and usually the example they give is if a car is totaled or stolen, and whatever you still owe on the car, the balance, okay? So just giving an example here. Let's say you buy a brand new car for 20 grand. The car is totaled in the first year. That's a bummer, sorry. And your car insurance pays 15 grand because that's how much the car was worth when it was totaled. It was worth 15. But you actually owe 5 grand still, right? Because you took a loan out for 20 grand. So the gap insurance would pay that leftover $5,000. So that's what it's for. It only comes with new car sales, which is why this contract says NA, that's not applicable here. Gap insurance is typically only offered with new cars. When would it be worth it? It depends. Usually if you put a small down payment on a new car, it might be worth it because it means, if something bad happens, then you don't have to worry about paying, this giant amount of loans that you still have out there. If you have a long loan, so if the loan is longer than 48 months, so that's 4 years, probably a good idea because in the span of 4 years, what are the odds that your car might get wrecked or totaled? It might. So might be worth it. Also, if you drive the car a lot. Again, if the more the car is out on the road, the higher chance it's going to get dinged or banged up or wrecked. So it's something to think about. Again, don't feel forced to buy into this thing. It's optional, completely optional. Okay, so the next part is the yellow box here. This is what we call the holder rule. And it looks like a lot of legalese, and it kind of is. But what's nice about it is it says any holder of this consumer credit contract is subject to all claims and defenses. We like that as attorneys because that means that whoever owns the contract is liable for it. So if for some reason this dealership sells your loan essentially to a debt buyer, also known as an assignee, then they can be held liable for breaches of this contract. So the holder rule is excellent. You want it there. It's important. It protects you. It means no matter what happens, you can go after someone for a breach of the contract. Even if the dealership is saying, we sold your contract, we don't have it anymore. Well, you can go after the debt buyer. And the debt buyer might go after the dealership. So no matter what, it means that you're going to be covered, except in the case that you buy a car for business purposes. The holder rule only counts for family household purchases. So if you're buying a truck to use for your landscaping business, then the holder rule won't look out for you. If you're buying a minivan to carry around your kids, then yeah, it will cover that. Okay, next page. This is page 2 of that same contract. Wow. So I didn't highlight anything because honestly, it's just a big chunk of teeny little words that you should go over again, but I summarized a couple things here. This first section, it says finance charge and payments. It explains how they calculate the finance charges, what the payments mean. It's useful. It's a good place to check if you don't really understand how it will bill you. Like if they bill you automatically from your bank account, it'll explain it there. So that's a good place to go if you're not sure about how payments are made. There's a section that says your other promises to us. Like I said before, right? A contract is a bargain for exchange between two people. They are promising you a car. What are you promising them? If in this one, it says if the vehicle is damaged, destroyed, or missing, you agree to pay us all you owe under the contract, which means, again, you have to pay off the car even if the car is totaled, which we know from the gap contract. It also says you agree not to sell, rent, lease, or transfer interest without permission by the dealership. Remember, this is a RISC, right? So it's a financing contract. You don't own the car. You don't own the car until you pay it off. So if you want to get rid of it, you need to talk to the dealership before you do it. Another thing it says is if the dealer pays for repair bills, you agree to repay it. Kind of a bummer. Not sure why that's in there, but it's in there. So this is exactly why you should take the time when you're purchasing a vehicle to sit there and read it. And if you have questions, ask the dealer about it. If you want stuff taken out, tell them you want things taken out. And it's their call. They will say no deal, like that's required. We won't take it out. Or if they really want to sell you the car, they'll take it out. These things are negotiable. Okay, another section on there, it says, if you pay late or break your other promises. What it talks about are late charges, late fees. If you pay your bill late, there are late charges. Collection costs. So if they're trying to collect on what they owe, then you have to pay for that as well. It also talks about repossession. So this is what happens. You get behind on enough payments, then the dealership will try to repossess your car. This section says how to get the vehicle back. That's pretty useful. It also talks about what happens if they try to sell the repossessed car. So lots of good information in here if you take the time to read it, which you definitely should. Oh, this is interesting. So this slide is loading. I wonder if I go to the next slide. Nope. Interesting. Looks like the slides aren't loading. Okay, so I am just going to pull up my version here. Sorry you can't see it. And let me see here, going down to, I wonder if this is, we're starting to get to the end here. Okay, so while that is, sorry for technical difficulties, folks. Okay, so it turns out you can see the slide, but I can't. So that's great. Slide number 14. So let me see what that is. Okay, so slide number 14. So this is, what is this? Oh yeah, okay, so slide number 14. Okay, so this is the bottom part of the very bottom part of the RISC that we were just looking at earlier. Okay, so what I put in a box there, the blue box on left, the APR, that's 3.24%. And on the left as well, you can see it says seller assigns interest to BECU. So that's one of our local banks here, a credit union. So that's the bank that is giving the loan of 3.24%. That's what you're agreeing to. And as you can see all the signatures here. That's what this customer agreed to. So what is a bushing violation? I mentioned that earlier. So the dealer has 4 business days to get this financing approved for 3.24%. If for whatever reason the dealer can't do it, then a brand new contract has to be signed, and everything that this customer paid into this vehicle has to be returned. And typically the car has to be returned too. You pretty much have to start from square one. So if you ever get a case where a dealer is trying to change the terms of the contract with you before 4 days, that's actually permitted. They can do that if the financing doesn't go through. If they try to do it after, then they're in trouble. And we've had a couple clients who've had what is called yo-yo sales, when they sort of bring you back and forth and make you come back to the shop after you take away the car because they're changing the terms of the agreement. They're not allowed to do that except under very special circumstances. Okay, I wonder if I can go to the next slide. Oh my God. Okay, I think it works. Okay, so practical tips. These are so great. Check the VIN number on the car. Of course, usually the VIN number will match on all the documents that you look at, and you should definitely make sure it matches. They're going to give you a buyer's order. They might give you a RISC. They'll probably give you they should give you a temporary license probably, and maybe a title, but make sure the VIN is the same across all of those documents. But even more important, make sure that VIN matches the car that you're actually buying. So when you take the test drive of the car, you should look inside the car door. Usually there's a sticker there that will have the tire pressure of the tires should be listed on there, but it'll also say the VIN number should be printed on the sticker. So I recommend take a picture of that sticker while you're there for the test drive, so then you don't have to run back and forth and check it later on. You'll just have the picture on your phone, and you could just make sure and double check and make sure the VIN matches everything. So you're good to go. Easy. Another practical tip, do not leave the dealership without a copy of the contract. Like, don't take their word for it. So what are the risks? What could go wrong? Well, they could change the terms on you. That yo-yo sales that we just talked about, they could put things in there that you didn't agree to. They could forge your signature on documents. It's happened before. Happens a lot. So just make sure you leave with exactly what you agreed to. If they say we don't have a copier machine, or they say that they'll mail it to you later, don't take that chance. Go ahead and take your phone and take a picture of every single document. It's worth it. It's worth the time. You don't want it to get lost in the mail, which has happened. And we all know that things always get lost in the mail sometimes. Or, you'll have to drive back there to get your contract. It's ridiculous. You really should just, at the moment, take a picture of everything if you have to. If they say they'll email it to you, you should sit there and wait for the email to come. Honestly, do not leave the dealership without a copy of what you signed. Okay, you should also count the pages and check the page numbers. It's happened before that either it's mailed later or they leave the room with your contract and they come back with a copy and the copy is missing pages. So always check to make sure you got every single document that you signed. Another tip that I didn't put on there, but you should make sure if you buy anything extra any added special things like service contracts or that anti-theft thing, those should come with contracts. Those should come with documents explaining what is included in this anti-theft thing, what is included in the service warranty. So make sure you have all the documentation to back up those items as well. Okay. And our next to last slide. So Northwest Consumer Law Center, we're here for you for when things like breaches of contracts happen or bushing scams or whatever might happen. We hope that they don't. But you're welcome to call us if you qualify for our services. We'll provide a free consult. We use the federal poverty guidelines. So if you don't know where you land on that chart, we will let you know. And if you don't qualify, we'll send you to a friend of our law firm. We have lots of friends. If you do get a consult with us, what should you bring? A copy of everything that you signed. That's why it's so important to have all the contracts and everything, because you know what? Sometimes a dealership will say that they lost it. Bummer. So make sure you don't lose anything. We also would like communications with the dealer. If you try to negotiate things yourself, we want to see what they said. If you have pictures of damage, pictures of the car before and after, estimates from mechanics if you got them for repairs, and also receipts for things that you paid for out of pocket. Pretty much just I would recommend this. Keep a folder of just all car related documents. Just keep them all together. Save everything, and you should be in good shape in case something bad happens. Okay, so thank you for attending. We have some time for questions. If you want to take some questions at this time.
Melissa, if anyone has questions, go ahead and enter those in the chat box on the right. We already have a couple of questions for you. The first question is, what should you do if the dealership refuses to give you a copy of the contract?
That is so rude. It's happened before. If they do, you should dig your heels in and say that you won't leave until you get the contract, and you can sit there and wait until they give it to you. Or you can definitely tell them no deal at all. No, if they don't give it to you that day, then no deal. And in our terms, we'd call it a rescission of the contract. But it's a very bad sign if they don't give it to you when you ask for it. And like I said, you signed it yourself, so you should be able to take a picture while you're there. So if they take it away from you and they won't give it back, then that's a really bad sign. That's very sad.
What should someone do in the instance they're very excited about the car, they go home and realize, oh no, they don't have a copy of the contract. They're already away from the dealership, they have the car. What should they do in that situation?
They should contact the dealership as soon as they can to see if they can get a copy of it. You should call the dealer. Hopefully, you got the name of whoever you talked to, whoever you signed the documents. Usually, you would have exchanged names by there. Ask for the person by name. Say, I want to talk to this person, and make sure you get a contract or a copy of the contract as soon as you can. If you have to drive back. It's worth it. If they say that they will email it by the end of the day, definitely check your email. Stay on them. Do not let it go too long. You could also call us I'd say if you've tried a couple times and you're not getting through to them, you can call us because you might have a claim.
Thank you. And last question for you. Is a dealership required to provide a copy of the contracts to you in a different language if your primary language isn't English?
Yeah, they are. And actually a couple of the buyer's orders that I had before had a sentence or two in Spanish, which isn't sufficient. It's not enough. But they are if you ask for one. Because otherwise, how would they know? I think they would sort of assume that you can read and speak English, but if you request one in a different language, then they need to provide that to you.
Thank you. And thank you for that excellent presentation. For everyone watching, check out our website to watch recordings of the other sessions in our webinar series. There's sessions about student loans, mortgages, foreclosure prevention, bankruptcy, and more available 24/7. You can find those at nwclc.org/COVID-19. If you're seeking legal representation, you're welcome to contact Northwest Consumer Law Center. Alyssa has all of our contact information below. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and take care.